Millwood, Michigan. Population 15,237. A typical American town where everyone knows each other by name. Cars are left unlocked at night, and the main attraction is the bell tower of the First United Church, visible from almost anywhere in town. Bird's-eye views show neat streets, the central square, the high school, and the majestic Victorian-era church building. Then come scenes of everyday life, parents walking their children to school, elderly people chatting on park benches, workers at a local factory. On October 15, 2023, this quiet town was rocked by an event that called into question everything its residents believed in. Pastor Daniel Foster, a spiritual leader and one of the community's most respected members, died at his own dinner table in front of his wife. Detective Lauren Ramirez sits in a police station, sorting through photos and documents. She looks directly into the camera. The call came in at 7:43 p.m. Martha Foster, the pastor's wife, called 911 and reported that her husband had lost consciousness during dinner. By the time paramedics arrived, Daniel Foster was not breathing. Archive footage of Daniel Foster preaching in church. His charisma is evident. He speaks with conviction and warmth, and his congregation listens intently. Daniel Foster was not just a pastor. In 12 years of service, he turned a dying parish into a thriving community. He founded a charitable foundation for low-income families. He organized a program to help drug addicts. For many, he was not just a spiritual mentor, he was their hope. Interview with Joel Harrington, a friend of the pastor, in his hardware store. "You know, when Daniel first came to our church, I was skeptical. Just another city preacher with big ideas, I thought. But he was different. He didn't talk about faith. He lived it. When my wife got cancer 3 years ago, Daniel was there every day, not for prayers or sermons, just to help. He mowed our lawn, cooked dinner, sat with me in the hospital at night." Joel falls silent, his eyes filling with tears. Who would have thought a man like that could have enemies? Footage of Daniel's funeral. Hundreds of people, many of them crying. Martha Foster stands by the coffin, dressed in a simple black suit. Her face is hidden by a veil. Interview with Abigail Parker, a parishioner at her home. "Martha was always flawless, the perfect pastor's wife. Modest, devoted, always ready to help. She and Daniel were like one. At least, that's how it seemed." Detective Ramirez is back on screen. The initial examination revealed nothing suspicious. A 42-year-old man in excellent health, sudden death at dinner, preliminary diagnosis, heart attack. But something didn't sit right with me. Maybe it was how calm Mrs. Foster was acting. Or maybe it was the fact that the day before he died, the pastor had requested a meeting with the church council, which never took place. Police photos from the scene, the dining room in the Foster's house, an uneaten dinner, an overturned glass of red wine, Daniel's body on the floor next to the table. The autopsy results came back 3 days later. Cause of death, not a heart attack. An extremely high concentration of digitalis, a substance found in foxglove, was found in Pastor Foster's blood. In sufficient doses, this plant can stop the heart. Shots from the greenhouse next to the church, where foxglove grows among other plants. Accidental poisoning was ruled out. Someone deliberately added poison to Pastor Foster's food or drink. And the circle of suspects was limited to one person, his wife, Martha Foster. Interview with Martha Foster in her living room. She looks exhausted but composed. 12 years of marriage. For 12 years, I supported Daniel's ministry. We built something special in this town. Why would I destroy that? The detective shows the camera a photo of Martha and Daniel taken a week before the tragedy at a church picnic. They are smiling, holding hands. Then we started digging deeper. Who was Martha Foster really before she came to Millwood? What was hidden behind the perfect facade of their marriage? And what was Pastor Foster about to announce at the church council meeting? Footage from the Foster home. Detective Ramirez and her team seize a computer, documents, and personal belongings. Voiceover. The following weeks of investigation revealed that in quiet Millwood, everyone had their secrets, and no one kept them as carefully as the pastor's family. Voiceover. Millwood, the week after Daniel Foster's funeral. The town seemed frozen in a state of collective shock. But for Detective Lauren Ramirez, the clock was ticking. Every day took her further away from the truth. Detective Ramirez drives her patrol car and parks near a small, neat house. The camera shows a sign that reads, St. Mary's Nursing Home. Harriet Whitley, 78 years old. Worked as a secretary at First United Church for 30 years. Retired a year before Daniel Foster arrived, but remained involved with the church community. Interview with Harriet in her modest but cozy room at the nursing home. You know, Detective, when they arrived, many people were skeptical. The pastor was so young, and his wife was a beautiful woman from the big city. Some parishioners were concerned that they were too modern, but Daniel quickly won the hearts of the community. And his wife? Harriet's expression changes slightly. Martha, she always stood in her husband's shadow, impeccably polite but distant. You know, she never really opened up to people. Even after 12 years in town, she didn't have any close friends. Footage of police officers studying surveillance camera footage from a pharmacy, supermarket, and garden center in Millwood. Detective Ramirez makes notes in his notebook. The poison that killed the pastor wasn't anything exotic. Foxglove is a common ornamental plant grown by many gardeners. It has also been used in traditional medicine to treat heart disease. That's why digitalis is difficult to detect in a standard autopsy. It's often mistaken for natural compounds in the body. Laboratory. A forensic expert shows the detective the results of additional tests. The concentration was too high for accidental poisoning. Moreover, traces of digitalis were found only in the pastor's glass and in the dish with sauce that was next to his plate. No one else could have been poisoned, even accidentally. The camera shows a reconstruction of the Last Supper. On the table are roast meat, a bottle of red wine, 2 glasses, and a sauce boat. Ramirez's voice. Martha confirmed that she cooked dinner herself. No strangers came to the house. There were no food deliveries. The poison got into Daniel's food or drink between the kitchen and the dining room. Interview with Joel Harrington in his office at the hardware store. Daniel had been tense for the last few months, not as open as usual. We were friends with our families. Our children grew up together. He usually shared everything with me, but lately... Did you ask him what was bothering him? Joel shifts uncomfortably in his chair. I did. He said he had discovered something disturbing related to the church. He said he had to check everything out before he could talk about it publicly. And was it related to his wife? Joel looks away. He didn't specify, but I noticed that he and Martha had become more formal with each other. It was like they were talking in public. The camera shows Detective Ramirez studying financial documents. The Foster family's bank accounts looked impeccable. A modest pastor's salary, a little extra income from a book Daniel published 3 years ago. Donations went directly to the church fund, to which Daniel had limited access. Nothing suspicious. But when we started looking into Martha's past, the story got more interesting. Photos of a younger Martha. She looks completely different. Bright makeup, fashionable clothes, a confident gaze. Before marrying Daniel, Martha Kane, her maiden name, lived in Chicago. She worked as a financial advisor at a company that went bankrupt after a fraud scandal. Martha was not directly accused, but her name appeared in several investor lawsuits. Documents, newspaper clippings with headlines about the financial scandal. Shortly after that, she met Daniel, who was conducting a religious seminar in Chicago. 6 months later, they were married, and Martha completely changed her life. A new city, a new environment, a new identity. Interview with Abigail Parker, who is visibly nervous. I owe Daniel everything. 3 years ago, I was at rock bottom. Addicted, in debt, in trouble with the law. He helped me find a job, a place to live, and get back into college. Were you close? Abigail hesitates. He was my mentor. We met once a week to discuss my progress and read the Bible. Always in the church office, always with the door open. Did Mrs. Foster know about these meetings? Of course. She even joined us sometimes. How would you describe their relationship? Abigail is silent for a long time. Respectful, they were like business partners. Efficient, polite, but what? I never saw any real warmth between them. I never saw them touch each other when they thought no one was looking. Detective Ramirez finds a note in Daniel's diary about a scheduled meeting with a lawyer the day before his death. The next scene is in the lawyer's office. Yes, Pastor Foster consulted with me about divorce proceedings, says attorney Gregory Schumann, looking concerned. He asked about the consequences for his position in the church, about the possible division of property. He was also interested in how to protect church assets in the event of a public scandal. Did he mention a reason for wanting a divorce? No specific details. He spoke of a breach of trust, that he had discovered something he couldn't ignore. Detective Ramirez is in the sheriff's office, talking to his colleagues. We have a motive. Martha could have killed her husband to prevent a divorce and a public scandal that would have ruined her reputation. We have an opportunity. She cooked dinner and served the food. Now we need irrefutable evidence. Search of the Foster home. Foxglove plants are found in the garden behind the house. In a closet in the utility room, there is a book on medicinal plants with a bookmark on the page about digitalis. Seen in the church office, Detective Ramirez and the sheriff's deputy are looking through documents. This was in Daniel's personal safe. The deputy sheriff hands over a folder. An independent financial audit of the church's accounts, conducted a month ago. Ramirez flips through the documents, her eyes widening. Almost $150,000 missing from the charity fund. The money was transferred in small amounts to a company called Kane Innovations. Kane is Martha's maiden name. Interview with Martha Foster at the police station. She looks tired but remains composed. Yes, I was cooking dinner. Yes, Daniel and I had grown apart recently. But I did not kill my husband. What can you tell us about Kane Innovations? Martha visibly pales. It's my brother's company. Daniel knew about it. And about the transfers from the church charity fund? A long pause. They were investments. Jeremy, my brother, was developing educational software for religious organizations. Daniel agreed to support the project. Then why were these transfers disguised as church renovation expenses in the official reports? Martha remains silent. Voiceover. The day after this interview, a search of the garden shed behind the Foster's house uncovered a bag containing gloves with traces of digitalis and a printout of an article about poisonous plants from the internet. Martha Foster was arrested on suspicion of murdering her husband. Voiceover. Millwood, 3 weeks after Pastor Foster's death. Martha's arrest divided the town into two camps. Some believed in her innocence. Others considered her a traitor not only to her husband, but to the entire community. Footage shows the courthouse where the preliminary hearings are taking place. Small groups of people hold signs reading, "Justice for Daniel" and "Martha is innocent." Interview with Sheriff Ray Collins in his office. The case has been widely reported in the regional media. Normally, I would say that this hinders the investigation, but in this case, it has helped us obtain new information. An email is shown on the screen. A man from Chicago, Andrew Walters, a former investor in Kane Innovations, contacted us after hearing the news of Martha's arrest. He lost a significant amount of money 5 years ago after investing in Jeremy Kane's project. Video interview with Andrew Walters. Kane Innovations was never involved in the development of educational software. It was an investment company offering unrealistically high returns. A classic Ponzi scheme. When it all collapsed, Jeremy Kane disappeared with the investors' money. But we always suspected that his sister was in on it. How did you find out about Martha Foster? Martha Kahn worked as a financial advisor and recruited clients to invest in her brother's company. She received commissions. When the scandal broke, she claimed she had also been deceived. Enough people believed her, and she was not held accountable. But many of us thought she was just a good actress. Seen at the police station, Detective Ramirez and FBI agent Michael DeVero are studying documents. We requested federal assistance because of the interstate nature of the financial transactions, Ramirez explains. Agent DeVero specializes in financial crimes. The FBI agent points to a money transfer scheme on the board. The transfers from the church fund began about 3 years ago. At first, they were small amounts, but then they grew. Over the past 6 months, more than $50,000 has been transferred. The money went to an account in the name of Kane Innovations. But from there, it was almost immediately transferred to offshore accounts. Could Martha have done this without her husband's knowledge? Absolutely. She was the treasurer of the church's charitable foundation. Daniel trusted her with the finances while he focused on spiritual matters. Seen in the office of the First United Church. Ramirez is talking to Daniel's secretary, Maggie Lawrence. The pastor changed about a month ago. Maggie nervously fiddles with the edge of her blouse. He started spending more time studying financial reports. I walked into his office once without knocking, and he quickly closed his laptop. It wasn't like him. Did he talk to his wife in the office during those days? Yes, but not like usual. Once I heard them arguing. Daniel said something like, "This isn't just a mistake, Martha. This violates everything we believe in." I didn't think much of it at the time. The camera shows Daniel's laptop, which is being examined by police computer experts. The pastor's search history reveals queries about financial fraud, criminal penalties for embezzlement, and most interestingly, information about Jeremy Kane. He was searching for his brother-in-law online. The screen shows a photo of an attractive man in his 40s wearing an expensive suit. Jeremy Kane, 44 years old. After his company went bankrupt in Chicago, he disappeared from view. According to Interpol, over the past 5 years, he has organized similar schemes in Canada and the UK under various names. Detective Ramirez meets with members of the church council in an empty church. Daniel requested an emergency council meeting for the morning after his death, says the elderly woman, the council chair, looking dejected. He said it was about the future of the church and that the information would shock us. He didn't provide any further details. Joel Harrington, sitting nearby, adds, "The night before, about 2 hours before it all happened, Daniel called me. He said he had discovered something that could destroy everything we had built, that he needed my support. I was supposed to stop by his place after dinner, but..." His voice trails off. Detective Ramirez examines Daniel's personal diary, found in his desk at the church. On October 14th, the day before his death, Daniel wrote, "I checked all the facts 3 times, no doubts. M used church money to support JES scheme. I can't believe she could betray not only me, but everyone who trusted us. Tomorrow, I have to tell the council everything. It will break many hearts, but the lies can't go on any longer." That's the last entry in the diary. Interview with Abigail Parker at the diner where she works as a waitress. Daniel came here on the day he died, around noon. He looked devastated. He said he had discovered betrayal at the heart of his life. Did he mention Martha? Not by name, but he said something that stuck with me. Sometimes the people we love the most can hurt us the deepest. And then he added something strange. I should have seen the signs sooner. History repeats itself. I didn't understand what he meant. An archive recording of Daniel's interview with a local TV station 6 years ago. Before becoming a pastor, I worked in finance in New York. I made good money, but I felt empty. Everything changed when my investment company went bankrupt as a result of fraud. I lost everything, but I found faith. That event led me to a life of service. Detective Ramirez in the sheriff's office. I was intrigued by this story. We checked Daniel's background. Before meeting Martha, he did indeed work as a financial analyst in New York. The company he worked for went bankrupt due to fraudulent schemes very similar to those used by Jeremy Kane. Daniel lost his job and his savings, after which he radically changed his life. A strange coincidence, isn't it? The phone rings. The sheriff's deputy picks up the phone, then turns to Ramirez. The bank called. They found a personal account belonging to Martha Foster that we didn't know about. There's almost $200,000 in it. Most of it was deposited in the last 3 years. Scene in the jail. Detective Ramirez is sitting across from Martha Foster. Have you seen your brother in the last year? Martha reluctantly nods. Twice. He came to a neighboring town. I didn't want Daniel to know. Their relationship was always tense. Why did you hide an account with $200,000 in it? Martha visibly pales, but quickly regains her composure. Those are my personal savings, from before I got married. I didn't have to account to Daniel for every penny I earned before I met him. It's strange that deposits to this account continued until recently. Where did the money come from, Martha? I want to talk to my lawyer. Voiceover. Phone records show that on the day of Daniel's death, Martha spoke to her brother 3 times. The last call was an hour before the fateful dinner. Scene in the lab. The medical examiner shows Ramirez the results of additional tests. The concentration of digitalis in the pastor's body was very high, which would have caused rapid cardiac arrest. But something else is interesting. Upon closer analysis, we found traces of the same substance in his body in significantly smaller amounts. What does that mean? Someone was giving him small doses of poison over a period of time, perhaps weeks. Not enough to kill him, but enough to cause symptoms similar to heart failure. And on the day of his death, the dose was increased to a lethal amount. Interview with Dr. Robert Fisher, the Foster's family doctor. Yes, Daniel came to see me about a month ago. He complained of periodic dizziness, weakness, nausea. I suggested overwork, stress. I advised him to get more rest. Did you consider other possibilities? The symptoms were quite general. I recommended a cardiogram, but Daniel kept putting off the test. He said he was too busy. Detective Ramirez and the deputy sheriff are driving in a car. The fields and forests of Michigan flash by outside the window. We've reconstructed Jeremy Kane's route. On the day of Daniel's death, he came to Millwood and stayed at a motel on the outskirts of town. He left early the next morning before the news of the pastor's death broke. Surveillance camera footage from the motel shows a man who looks like Jeremy. Evening. Detective Ramirez is at home, the walls covered with photos and documents related to the case. She connects the dots. What started as a simple murder motivated by money and blackmail was becoming more complicated. How did Daniel and Martha, two people with similar backgrounds in finance, both victims of fraud, find each other? Was it chance or a carefully planned meeting? Ramirez examines Martha's credit card records. A week before Daniel's death, Martha purchased airline tickets to the Cayman Islands. 2 tickets, one in her name and one in the name of Jeffrey Bradley. The flight was scheduled for 2 days after the pastor's death. The police checked the name Jeffrey Bradley in their databases. Jeffrey Bradley is one of Jeremy Kane's known aliases, Voiceover. As the investigation gathered evidence against Martha Foster, a picture of a carefully planned murder began to emerge. But questions remained. Why didn't Daniel go to the police immediately after discovering his wife's financial fraud? What tied him to Martha's past more than the devotion to truth he preached? Voiceover, Millwood, Michigan. 5 weeks have passed since the death of Pastor Daniel Foster. For a town accustomed to a quiet life, each new revelation in the case was another shock. The footage shows the quiet streets of Millwood. A temporary memorial with a photo of Daniel, flowers, and candles has been set up near the church. Detective Lauren Ramirez stands at a board with evidence in her office. She attaches a new photo, a house on the oceanfront. Property in the Cayman Islands purchased 2 years ago under the name of Jeffrey Bradley. Value, $1.7 million. The source of funding can be traced to offshore accounts linked to Kane Innovations. FBI agent Devereaux nods. Our colleagues in the International Investigations Department have confirmed that Jeremy Kane systematically transferred money to this offshore account, creating a backup airfield. We estimate that over the past 5 years, he has withdrawn more than $5 million through various fraudulent schemes. And Martha was part of this plan? It appears so. She had access to the safe with the documents in this house. Photos, keys, passwords. Seen at the district attorney's office. Prosecutor Helena Montgomery reviews the evidence gathered. We have enough to charge him with first-degree murder, premeditated, with aggravating circumstances. But the jury will be interested in not just how, but why. What was the point of no return? Detective Ramirez looks thoughtfully at the timeline of the investigation. 3 weeks ago, Daniel began showing symptoms: dizziness, weakness, nausea. 2 weeks ago, he met with a divorce lawyer. A week ago, he scheduled a meeting with the church council. The day before his death, he met with Abigail at a diner and told her about the betrayal. What happened in the 3 weeks before that? What was the catalyst? Daniel's email archive. Ramirez scrolls through the incoming messages. Here, an email from a former colleague in New York, Trevor Adams. They hadn't spoken in almost 10 years, since Daniel left the financial sector. The text of the email appears on the screen. Daniel, you won't believe who I just saw in the financial district, Jeremy Kane. He's now going by the name Jeffrey Bradley, but it's definitely him. Remember I showed you his photo when the Atlantic equity scam was uncovered? The man who caused you to lose everything. I don't know if you care after all these years, but I thought I should let you know. Check the connection between New York Daniel and Jeremy Kane, Ramirez orders. The next scene is in a financial news archive. Headlines from 10 years ago. Atlantic equity collapses amid massive fraud. Thousands of investors lose savings. Prime suspect Jeremy Kane disappears. Ramirez reads the article. Among those affected are dozens of the company's financial analysts, including Daniel Foster, who lost not only his job, but also all his investments. The scene shifts to a prison visiting room. Ramirez shows Marta a photograph. Did you know that your brother was responsible for the financial collapse that led Daniel to change careers? That it was because of him that he lost everything 10 years ago? Marta cannot hide her shock. That's impossible. Daniel worked in New York, Jeremy in Chicago. Atlantic Equity was the parent company for regional investment firms, including the one your brother worked for. His Ponzi scheme ultimately led to the collapse of the entire structure. I didn't know. I swear I didn't. And when you met Daniel at that religious seminar in Chicago, was that really a chance encounter? Martha is silent for a long time, then replies quietly, Jeremy sent me his photo. He said this man could be useful to us, that he had a clean reputation and access to money through the church. He suggested we befriend him. Did you plan to use him from the beginning? No, everything changed. When I got to know Daniel, when I saw what kind of man he was, I really fell in love with him. I left my old life behind. I wanted to start over. But in the end, you went back to your old ways. Jeremy showed up 3 years ago. He said he was in trouble, that he was being threatened by people he owed money to. He asked for help. Just once. I thought it would be a one-time thing. Voiceover. Martha's story was only partially confirmed by the facts. The first transfer from the church fund was indeed made 3 years ago, but it was followed by dozens of others. Computer lab. A technical expert shows Ramirez the deleted files recovered from Daniel's laptop. He had been conducting his own investigation for the past 3 weeks. After receiving a letter from a former colleague, Daniel began searching for information about Jeremy Kane and his current activities. On the screen is a folder with photos. Jeremy is in various places with different people. Some of the photos were taken with a hidden camera. He hired a private investigator. Here are the receipts for the services. Daniel received the last report 4 days before his death. The report contains photos of Martha and Jeremy meeting in a cafe in a neighboring town, bank statements, recordings of telephone conversations. The next scene is at the Foster's house. The police are conducting an additional search of Daniel's office. A small safe is found behind a painting. A diary. Ramirez cautiously turns the pages. Started a month before his death. Daniel's entries reflect his inner struggle. October 3rd. Received shocking news from Trevor. The man who destroyed my former life is my wife's brother. This can't be a coincidence. I need to find out the truth. October 7th. Hired a detective. I'm plagued by doubts. Was our marriage part of some plan? Was all the love just an act? October 12th. The dizziness is getting worse. The doctor says it's stress, but I feel like it's something more serious. Maybe I'm just paranoid after all these discoveries. October 14th. I got definitive confirmation. Martha was seeing Jeremy. I checked the church's financial records. Large sums of money are missing. How could I have been so blind? How could I have trusted her with the finances after everything I went through in New York? Tomorrow, I'll tell the council everything. It's the end. Ramirez closes the diary. He knew, and she knew that he knew. Scene in the lab. A forensic scientist holds a glass taken from the Foster's home. The concentration of digitalis is highest in Daniel's wine glass. Judging by the traces, the main dose was added to the wine. Traces were also found on his plate, but in lower concentrations. That explains why he lost consciousness at the table so quickly. Ramirez nods. Voiceover. Detectives have reconstructed the timeline of Daniel Foster's last day. Morning. Daniel is working in his office at the church. He calls several members of the church council to schedule an emergency meeting for the next morning. In the afternoon, he meets with Abigail at a diner and appears depressed. At 3:30 p.m., he returns home and spends an hour in his office. At 4:45 p.m., he calls Joel Harrington and asks him to come over after dinner. 5:30 p.m., Martha returns with groceries for dinner. 6 p.m., Martha's last phone call to her brother. 7 p.m., dinner begins. 7:38 p.m., Daniel collapses on the floor, unconscious. 7:43 p.m., 911 is called. 7:59 p.m., paramedics pronounce him dead. Joel Harrington arrives at 8:15 p.m. and finds the house surrounded by police and ambulances. Now, let's reconstruct what happened during dinner, Ramirez suggests. The next scene is a reconstruction in the Fosters' dining room. Actors resembling Daniel and Martha are sitting at the table. There are plates of roast beef and glasses of wine. Voiceover. According to investigators, Martha prepared dinner knowing it would be her husband's last meal. She also knew that the next morning Daniel was going to reveal her financial fraud to the church council, which would mean not only the end of her marriage, but also possible criminal prosecution. The actress playing Martha adds something to the glass. We have no direct evidence of what Daniel and Martha said during that last dinner, but we know from the pastor's diary that he was going to confront her about the lies. Neighbors testified that at around 7:20 p.m., they heard loud voices coming from the Fosters' house, although they couldn't make out the words. The actors reenact the tense conversation. Daniel looks upset but determined. Martha tries to justify herself. Daniel raises his glass and takes a sip. A few minutes later, his face contorts in pain. He grabs his chest and falls to the floor. The actress playing Martha hesitates for a few seconds, then goes to the phone. Voiceover. According to the medical examiner, it took about 15 to 20 minutes from the time the lethal dose of poison was ingested to the loss of consciousness. It took about another 5 minutes for the heart to stop. If Martha had called for help immediately, there was a chance of saving Daniel, but she waited. Scene in the prosecutor's office. Prosecutor Montgomery lists the charges: first-degree murder with aggravating circumstances, financial fraud, embezzlement of charitable funds. The jury will have no sympathy for a woman who not only stole from the church, but also cold-bloodedly murdered her husband to cover up her crimes. What about Jeremy Kane? Ramirez asks. He's been placed on an international wanted list. His accounts in the Cayman Islands have been frozen, but it won't be easy to find him. He has fake passports and contacts all over the world. Interview with Abigail Parker in the park near the church. The last time I saw Daniel, he said something that now takes on new meaning. He said, "We can't change the past, Abby, but we have to take responsibility for our mistakes, even if the price is too high." At the time, I thought he was talking about his work at the church. Now I realize he was talking about something much bigger. The scene is in court. The preliminary hearings have begun. Martha, dressed in prison garb, sits next to her lawyer. The prosecutor presents the evidence. And finally, Your Honor, the prosecution has irrefutable evidence of intentional poisoning using digitalis, a plant containing cardiac glycoside. The defendant not only added a lethal dose to her husband's wine on the day of his death, but also systematically gave him smaller doses over a period of weeks, causing a gradual deterioration in his health. Martha's lawyer stands up. Your Honor, these charges are based on circumstantial evidence. There are no witnesses who saw my client add anything to her husband's food or drink. Furthermore, we have evidence that Daniel Foster was aware of the risks to his health due to stress, but disregarded his doctor's advice. Journalists in the courtroom feverishly take notes. Voiceover. Behind the loud headlines and sensational details of the case, many forgot a simple truth. A man who dedicated his life to serving others was betrayed by those he trusted most. Daniel Foster survived financial ruin caused by fraud, only to face the same betrayal a decade later from the woman he loved, the sister of the man who destroyed his first life. Detective Ramirez stands at Daniel's grave. Sometimes a detective's job isn't just to find the killer, but to understand the victim's story. Daniel wasn't just a pastor. He was a man who truly believed in redemption. Even after learning the truth about his wife's past, even after realizing the extent of her lies, he didn't go to the police right away. He wanted to talk to the church council first. Perhaps part of him still hoped for a miracle. Voiceover. Millwood, Michigan, June 2024, 8 months after the murder of Pastor Daniel Foster. A small town once known only for its annual Apple Festival is now mentioned in national news as the site of one of the most shocking crimes in recent years. Footage of the county courthouse, journalists and television crews outside, a crowd of local residents holding signs reading, "Justice for Daniel." The trial of Martha Foster began 6 months after her arrest. During that time, investigators gathered evidence, and the story of the pastor and his murderous wife became the subject of numerous rumors and speculations. Interview with Sheriff Collins outside the courthouse. This is one of the most difficult cases of my career. Not because of technical difficulties. The poisoning was proven. The motive is obvious. The difficulty lies in the psychological aspect. How a person who dedicated his life to serving others became the victim of such a cold-blooded betrayal. Scene in the courtroom. Prosecutor Montgomery addresses the jury. The woman sitting before you is not simply a woman accused of murdering her husband. She is a person who built her life on lies. Martha Foster, or rather Martha Kane, created the image of the perfect pastor's wife, modest, pious, devoted to the church and the community. But behind that facade was a woman who systematically stole money, intended to help the needy, and sent it to her con artist brother. The camera shows Martha at the defense table. She looks pale but maintains a calm expression. When Daniel Foster discovered the truth, she did not repent. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't try to fix the situation. Instead, she devised a murder plan. Not an impulsive act in a moment of despair, but a cold, calculated plan that was carried out over weeks. The prosecutor shows the jury enlarged photos of the toxicology results. As the experts will confirm, Martha Foster began slowly poisoning her husband several weeks before the final act. She wanted his death to look like the result of a natural illness. When Daniel made an appointment with a cardiologist, the plan had to be accelerated. Dr. Robert Fisher is called to the courtroom. Pastor Foster came to me complaining of weakness and dizziness. I suspected heart problems and scheduled an examination. He was supposed to have it 2 days after that evening. The next witness is Brian Jenkins, a private investigator hired by Daniel. Pastor Foster approached me after receiving information about Jeremy Kane. He was shocked to learn that his brother-in-law was the same man who had caused him to lose his job and savings in New York. He asked me to follow his wife and see if she was in contact with her brother. The courtroom screen shows photographs taken by the detective. Martha and Jeremy having lunch at a restaurant in a neighboring town, exchanging some documents. Did you report your findings to the pastor? Yes. I sent him my last report 3 days before he died. He called me after reading it and was very upset. He said that now he had everything he needed to fight back. Abigail Parker's testimony is met with silence in the courtroom. Daniel helped me when everyone else turned their backs on me. When I left rehab, no one wanted anything to do with me. He gave me a chance, believed in me. A few days before he died, he looked broken, like a man who had lost faith not in God but in people. Did he tell you what was bothering him? Not directly, but he said, "Sometimes evil comes in the guise of those we love most." I didn't understand then. Now I realize he was talking about his wife. Witness testimony follows one after another. Members of the church council confirm Daniel's request for an emergency meeting. Banking experts demonstrate the transfer of money from the charity fund. Toxicologists explain the effects of digitalis on the body. Interview with Detective Ramirez during a break in the trial. The case against Martha Foster is virtually irrefutable. Financial documents, toxicology results, witness testimony. But the most convincing evidence was the escape plan itself. The camera shows the evidence. Tickets to the Cayman Islands. Documents in the name of Cynthia Bradley. Photos of the villa. Martha didn't just plan to kill her husband. She was preparing for a new life with her brother, using money stolen from the church and parishioners who trusted her. In the second half of the trial, the defense presents its version of events. Martha's lawyer, William Pratt, addresses the jury. No one disputes the fact that money was transferred to Mrs. Foster's brother's company accounts, but these transfers were made with Pastor Foster's knowledge. He knew his wife was supporting her brother. He may not have known the full extent, but he was aware of the fact. Pratt shows documents signed by Daniel authorizing some of the initial transfers. As for the poisoning, tests showed the presence of digitalis in the pastor's body. But there is no direct evidence that my client added this substance to her husband's food or drink. Pratt calls a defense witness, Lisa Morgan, a parishioner and member of the gardening club. Pastor Foster himself was interested in plants. He grew various herbs in the church greenhouse, including foxglove. He was interested in traditional medicine and even gave a seminar on the use of plants for medicinal purposes. Is it possible that Pastor Foster himself experimented with these plants? Objection! The prosecutor jumps up. That's just speculation. I agree, the judge says. The camera shows the jury's reaction. Many seem unconvinced by the defense's arguments. In his closing statement, Prosecutor Montgomery addresses the jury. Daniel Foster believed in redemption. He helped drug addicts, ex-convicts, people who had lost hope. Perhaps that is why he found it so difficult to believe that the woman he loved was capable of such betrayal. But the facts are inexorable. Montgomery points to the documents on the table. Tickets to the Cayman Islands in the name of Martha and Jeffrey Bradley. Jeremy Kane's alter ego. Bank transfers made the day before the murder. Toxicology tests showing systematic poisoning. And finally, the behavior of the defendant herself. No attempt to immediately help her husband when he lost consciousness. He looks at Martha, who is sitting with her head down. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you are not looking at a wife defending herself from a violent husband. You are not looking at a woman acting in the heat of the moment. Before you stands a calculating murderer who cold-bloodedly took the life of a man who had dedicated himself to serving others, simply because he could expose her crimes. Voiceover. After 3 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict, guilty on all counts. Martha Foster was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. A scene in prison, several months later. Detective Ramirez is sitting across from Martha in the visiting room. The international authorities have arrested your brother in Brazil. He is being extradited to the United States to stand trial on charges of fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and other crimes. Do you have anything to add to your testimony? Martha looks older, exhausted. You know, I really love Daniel. At first it was a game, yes. Jeremy found out that the pastor who was conducting a seminar in Chicago was the same financial analyst from New York. He thought it was a funny coincidence, an opportunity to get back at the system that he believed had ruined his life. So it was revenge at first? Martha shook her head. For Jeremy, maybe. For me, it was a chance to start over. I fell in love with Daniel for real, in his faith, his kindness. 3 years ago, Jeremy found me and threatened to expose my past. He said he would destroy everything Daniel and I had built. I agreed to help him once, thinking it would be the end. But with Jeremy, there is never an end. Why didn't you go to your husband? Tell him the truth? And lose him? Lose everything? I thought I could solve the problem myself, get the money back before anyone noticed, but the amounts kept growing and there was no way out. And the decision to kill him? Martha is silent for a long time. When I realized that Daniel knew, that he had hired a detective, that he had seen my meetings with Jeremy, I panicked. Jeremy suggested a plan. He said it was the only way out. Was the digitalis his idea? No, mine. I read about it. I knew about its effect on the heart. I thought it would be more merciful, faster. But you gave him the poison gradually, over weeks. You saw him suffering, weakening, and you kept going. Martha stares into space. Every day I told myself I would stop, that I would find another way, but every day it became harder to turn back. And that evening? What did you talk about over dinner? He knew. He looked at me as if he was seeing me for the first time. He said he knew everything about my past, about Jeremy, about the money, that he would tell the board in the morning and then go to the police, but even then he said he was praying for me, that he believed I could change. Tears streamed down Martha's face. The last thing he said was, "I forgive you, Martha, but you have to answer for your actions." And then he drank the wine, and a few minutes later, voiceover. Jeremy Kane was extradited to the U.S. and stood trial for numerous financial crimes and complicity in murder. He was sentenced to 45 years in prison. Most of the stolen money was never recovered. Epilogue. Millwood, 1 year later. The camera shows the renovated First United Church, with a memorial to Daniel Foster at the entrance. Joel Harrington, now acting pastor, is interviewed. We lost a lot, the trust and innocence of our community. But Daniel taught us that even from the darkest tragedy, light can be born. We created a new system for managing the charitable foundation with complete transparency. We established the Daniel Scholarship for students studying theology. Next to the church is a new rehabilitation center for addicts. The center was Daniel's idea, his dream. We decided to make it a reality. Abigail Parker, whom he once helped get back on her feet, now runs the rehabilitation program. Abigail shows a photo of Daniel on the wall of the center. He believed that everyone deserves a second chance, that people can change. The tragedy is that a man who believed so deeply in redemption was killed by someone he gave a chance at a new life. Footage from the cemetery. Detective Ramirez stands at Daniel's grave with a bouquet of flowers. Every investigation leaves a mark, but this case changed me. It made me think about the nature of trust, betrayal, forgiveness. Pastor Foster knew his wife had betrayed him, and he still offered her forgiveness. That's not weakness, as many people think. It's the greatest strength. Voiceover. The story of Daniel and Martha Foster went far beyond Millwood. It became the subject of books, documentaries, and psychological studies. It is the story of a man who was twice victimized by the same evil, first losing his fortune, then his life, and of a woman whose lies ultimately became her prison before she was even sentenced. The final shots show Millwood from a bird's eye view, a small town that has been changed forever. Pastor Daniel Foster often said in his sermons that the truth always comes out. The price of that truth was exorbitant. But, as his followers say, the light he brought into this world continues to shine even after his death.